they literally would bow. Like they would get, if they were in a place where they could get on their knees, they would get on their knees and bow. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Joy,
I live in the US,
and I live in England
and we were across the world.
on a mission. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. We are so happy to be here with you, sharing our experience on the mission field, across the world on a mission. Michelle, who went to Taiwan and Japan, and myself, who went to the Ukraine. It was, I hope so far it's been a blessing for you all. And even those who are contemplating going on the mission field as well, I hope it's been a blessing. Today, we're going to be talking about the culture. So, Michelle, without further ado, how did you find the culture? How
My
was it?
favorite part. It's my favorite part to tell you guys about the culture, the culture, the culture. One of the reasons that I love to travel is the culture. I don't know what it is, but I enjoy learning so much about people's culture, why they do what they do, how they do things. I just love the differences. I just love learning those things, history, and all of that. I love that part of going to another country, meeting people that are different from me. Yeah. So that was one of my favorite parts of just being in Taiwan and Japan. I got to learn so many things. And to me, culture is wrapped up in everything is wrapped up in the culture, the language, the food, the people, their history, all of that is tied up in the culture. So there are so many things that I learned about the Chinese culture that I never knew. When I first got there, I learned that when you ate with chopsticks and you're done eating with the chopsticks, you don't ever, you have to put the chopsticks together and put it down on your plate. You don't just leave it wide open. There was a cultural, there was a stigma to doing that with your chopsticks. I learned that in Japan, that whenever you greeted someone, especially someone who was older, um, um, had a different status from you, had a different job level. For example, if you met your boss, you wouldn't just shake your boss's hand. You
Mhm.
would bow, and you
Okay.
wouldn't just bow. You would go on your knees. Yes, I
Okay.
know. When I first learned it, I was like,
Hmm.
wow, interesting. So they were showing you the different ways to bow, because in my language, we do not bow. We shake or hug. In my culture, sorry, I said language. We shake or we hug. And most times I grew up in a culture where you shook hands. Um, Even in American culture, there's a lot of hugs. You do shake hands as well. But in the Japanese culture, it was all about bowing. And that was one thing that when I told my mom and my parents about it, they were like, oh, yeah, you're not supposed to bow to anyone but God. And that's how we grew up. But they would bow as they greet. It was a sign of greeting. Bow to each other, just a tilt of the head if you were meeting a friend or a co-worker. But if you were meeting like a boss, an executive boss, those people who worked in offices, they literally would bow. Like they would get, if they were in a place where they could get on their knees, they would get on their knees and bow. If not, they would go as low as they could in bowing to the boss. How about you, Joy? I want to hear about you.
Oh man, like you said, the culture has to do with the language, the food, the music, all of that stuff. And it's different. The culture is different based on, your encounters. So, uh, obviously, we're surrounded by Christians most of the time in the school. And so, it's a different culture when you meet with people inside church. as when you met with, other students that weren't Christians. Their, their practices are quite different. But we didn't have any of that. Obviously, we know that the Asian culture is very, very, very different to, say, the European culture. And so I didn't have, none of that bowing stuff and so on going on. But what I did have an experience was, like I was mentioning before, that there's a very big respect for, teachers, per se. They were your educators, or they are your educators. And so there was a big respect for, the teacher. So your they respect you, even when you go out with them and so on. They want to buy you things and all of that stuff. They have a culture as well too. Their religion is Russian Orthodox, so they would go to, churches and so on around about Easter time. There's so many things that they practiced. To be honest with you, it was very wide and just interesting to see what they did. I personally liked, their cultural dresses that they wore. They had a special street for tourists as well, and they had what we call the matrushka dolls, where you'd have a big fat mama doll, and then inside it would be the dad, and then inside the dad would be the children, and it was really, really lovely to see. I will try to get a picture for you of that. But just their culture is rich. The artwork, the architecture. I love Krishatik down in Kiev, in the center. There's a street called Krishatik, and that was the main street. And the architecture on that street, I just pray to God that, in the wars and whatever they're having now, that they don't destroy that particular street, because it's so beautiful with all those ancient buildings, and just the architectural view and of everything. It's just so beautiful. The culture is rich, and people are very warm as well, and friendly. I know I had my encounters there, the negative encounters, but to be honest with you, the population on a whole, that's maybe 5% or less of the population when it comes to racism. Well, that's what I encounter anyway. I find that they're very friendly people when you get to know them. They're quite friendly and outgoing. So yeah, it's a rich culture, very rich.
Yeah,
And
just a
obviously
little.
we'll get into the food bit of things, because I really enjoyed some of the cuisine that I'll tell you about in a later
Yeah,
video.
yeah. It's interesting that you're remembering the the dresses, because I found that that was very, very different from where I grew up. Their dress and their clothing. Um, for me, I got a chance to actually dress in the national dress, the kimono, when I was in Japan. Uh, there was a specific day that um, there was a specific day that one of the ladies from the center came over to our house, and she brought a traditional kimono, and she had us dressed. Literally, she dressed us like we couldn't dress ourselves, because there were so many layers to this. It took us about half an hour to an hour to get dressed into this traditional kimono. And she did both. Myself and my roommate, she dressed us up. She brought these kimonos and she dressed us up. And we were just standing there, and she was just putting on each layer at a time. And it was so fun. And you'll see the pictures. I have a lot of pictures because I enjoyed it so much. And then after we were done getting dressed into the kimono, I remember them giving us like I think we had like a little bag. We didn't have the actual shoes that they would wear, and then we went out. We were dressed in a kimono for a day, and that was one of the things that was intriguing to me, just to see people in their kimonos. And there were specific times within the year that they would wear the kimonos. They wouldn't always have them on. They dressed like in Japan. They dressed like very modern, very they're very fashionable. I would say there were lots of extreme fashion as well in Japan. With the hair, I would even see people with different styles in their hair colors, very colorful in their style of dress. On their shoes, they would wear these platforms. Well, this is a long time ago. I'm sure the style of the fashion has changed now, but I've known that Japanese people were very fashionable people. In Taiwan, it was slightly different. They did have the traditional dresses as well, but most I would see them mostly on the Aboriginals that were there and different people. But yeah, their dress was what was interesting to me in their culture.
I've
And guys,
always
we have
wanted
so
to
much to
wear a
tell you about
kimono.
culture, so I'm sure we're gonna have to do two parts. But yeah, anything else you wanted to share, Joy, about the
No,
culture?
I was saying that I wish I could wear a kimono. That's what I wanted to, initially, I pictured myself wearing a one of those kimonos. I'd love to um have worn, such, but didn't get to.
Oh, what's that?
This is one of the dolls that I got in Russia, and this is how basically how they would dress. This is their wear in the Ukraine, I would say. This is their traditional outfit. This is for the men, and the women, they would dress looking like this.
Oh, cool.
I
Looking
have
for
one
the
of those
silhouette.
shirts. I'm sure you'll post a video, picture of we'll post a picture of me in one of the traditional shirts. But this is how they would dress, very colorful, and some of their artwork, they're very, very creative people. You know, their artwork and so on. I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed you know, emerging or immersing in that culture.
One more thing I wanted to share as well that I enjoyed. I know I'm talking a lot about Japan because Japan is just coming back to my memory more so right now. And I think it's because it's the most recent trip that I did as well. And there was a lot that popped out to me culturally from Japan. I remember one of our students came and took us out. She wanted to have a special outing with us, and she took us to a tea ceremony. And tea ceremonies are very popular, not only in Japan, but also in Taiwan. There were a lot of tea. They had a lot of tea shops in Taiwan. But in Japan, we were taken out by our student to a tea ceremony. And guys, at this tea ceremony, it was so cool. We went to a traditional tea house, or where they would make them, and where they would do these tea ceremonies, and they had like a tatami mat on the floor, and we had to kneel. We sat in a kneeling position, but with but sort of sitting, but yet still kneeling position. And they would have these little teapots around us, and they would serve pour the tea, and there would be several women. And literally, this was so interesting in their culture because I found it so, I don't know, I found it like, I couldn't really understand it, but I found it interesting. We sat there, they poured the tea, and we drank the tea. But before we would drink the tea, we would look at the cup. We would look at the teacup, we would look at the design and the art, and we would talk about it, and we would say, oh, kirei ne. And kirei means pretty. Like, isn't it beautiful? It's beautiful. And they would make these little gestures, and that's like small talk, a lot of small talk in the tea ceremony
Before drinking.
before drinking. And then we would drink it, and then we would drink some more and drink some more, and we would just chat, just ladies. It was a ladies thing. So we would
Yeah.
just have this ladies chat, but that was just very interesting to me in their culture. That's something that they did, and it was fun. Yeah.
One thing I admire with Japanese people, they're quite gentle people. Did you find that? They're, especially ladies, they're quite gentle. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gentle and they're very what's the word I'm looking for? Formal. They're very formal in a lot of things until you become informal, like so close that you know. If you ever heard that saying, I think it's a more Asian thing where let's talk casually. Like they
Mm,
use that term in Korea. They use that term. Let's talk casually. And I did spend some time in Korea. I went on vacation while I was in Japan to Korea. They would say, let's talk casually. It means let's talk as friends. When you
mm.
talk formally, you know, you're literally, oh, you're just an acquaintance. I just met you. Hello. You know, you do all of the respectful things. But yeah, yeah.
What
But
are some
that's,
of the lessons that you learned, the takeaways?
um, oh man, the lessons right here would be just embracing someone else's culture, embracing someone else's, you know, way of doing things, and being okay without judgment. You know, I know that some people judged me while I was there because of the color of my skin. I know this. And I know that maybe I might have judged some things in their culture that I thought, oh, this is weird or different. But as I spent time there, I began to understand the importance of respecting someone else's culture and even embracing those things that you might agree with and be okay with, and then agree to disagree on those things that you don't. So it's learning that balance that everybody's not going to be like me or be like us, and it doesn't mean that I have to disrespect you or treat you any less. So just treating each other with love and respect regardless of our culture. That's my lesson.
My lesson is just how diverse we all are. Um, I really appreciated learning about, you know, the culture, while, you know, at the time it was difficult at times, like you said, you know, because there was a lot that was different, you know. And also just imagine living in a place where your food that you're used to, you know, your type of music that you're used to, you know, just the general atmosphere and everything that you're used to isn't, you know, there isn't your everyday norm now. And so, you know, it was different. But, you know, like you opened with what you opened, I love to learn about cultures. And so it's not that I embraced it, because some of it I was fighting back at, because it was just different. And I'm just being honest, it was just different. And so, but I learned very quickly that, you know, we're all different, especially for the purpose that we were there for. You know, you had to learn and understand why they were the way they were, or how to approach them, because that's how you learned about the people that you're actually communicating with on a day-to-day basis. So there wasn't any wrong or right, or there is no wrong or right culture. We're all from different parts of the world, and therefore, you know, we may be accustomed to different things. That doesn't mean that my way is the right way, or my culture is the right culture. And like I said, and I keep saying, my, you know, repeating this thing, the only right culture is the culture of Christ, isn't it? But, you know, we all are from different parts of the world, and we all do things differently. And therefore, my lesson was just being able to, you know, embrace, you know, outside of my norm, being able to accept people, you know, for who they are, you know, and just accept it for what it is. Doesn't mean that you have to change into something else, but just being able to accept people for what they are, or who they present as, in terms of, you know, Russian, Ukrainians, you know, Japanese, Taiwanese, and all of that. We're all different. We dress different. We look different. But, you know, the common thing we have, the thing we have in common is Christ.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode. Guys, look forward to part two because there's so much more to tell about culture. So much.
Yes.
So I hope you will share this video with someone else and subscribe if you haven't yet. And we'll see you in the next episode. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Joy.
I live in the US.
And I live in England.
And we were across the world
On a mission.